Dr. Mary Velasquez and Kathy Crouch. They were selected because they're models, in my opinion, of programs that have been developed that consider feasibility issues from the beginning, and also an agency that's really sort of used research data to inform what they do and how they serve people, and really put some of these concepts into place. And so I'm really excited for them and what they have to share today. I'd like to invite Dr. Jody Berger-Cardosa to come on up and introduce them. And real quick, one thing before I forget, I want to thank all of our wonderful student volunteers. We've had over 26 MSW and Ph.D. students help out with this conference over the past few days.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I have the privilege of introducing first Dr. Mary Velasquez, Professor, Associate Dean for Research, and Director of the Center for Social Work Research at the University of Texas, Austin. She's also the Director of the Health Behavior Research and Training Institute there as well. Her area of specialty is the development and implementation of interventions using the trans-theoretical model of behavioral change and motivational interviewing. Dr. Velasquez is a lead author on Group Treatment for Substance Abuse, a Stages of Change Therapy Manual, and co-author of a newly released Substance Abuse Treatment and Stages of Change, Selecting and Planning Interventions. What is fun about me getting to introduce Dr. Velasquez is that when I was a practitioner here in Houston, down in Southside in Galena Park, she was running her Project Choices grant outside of Southside, and I was one of the clinicians that was introduced to the model of motivational interviewing and actually received some training to implement some of the model in my own practice. So it is with great pleasure that I get to introduce Dr. Mary Velasquez.
Thank you, Jody. Good morning. You guys hear me? Okay, this is a lie. I can't use that, but we're doing good. Okay. Is that better? Yeah, I was just trying to use the light to talk into. It didn't work. Okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conference so far. I've learned a heck of a lot. When Danielle started planning this conference and asked me to present, I agreed, but I said I can do something short and sweet. I had a keynote next week, or have a keynote next week for a conference that I'm kind of stressed about at the business school at UT Austin, and we're going to talk about, this is the first time, we're going to talk about social issues in healthcare with people in business school, and it's a big conference. So I said I'm not going to get immersed in the literature here, and I certainly know evidence-based treatment. My colleague and friend Alan Rubin and I have had lots of lively discussions around federal grant funding and some of the things we talked about yesterday. But then I started looking at the papers that are on the website, and I think that's really cool, by the way, that you put the papers for the conference on the website. And I got just immersed in it, and there are just some amazing thinkers at this conference, and so I'm honored to be speaking today. My task is I'm just going to talk for 30 minutes. We're going to talk about one intervention that is evidence-based. So I'll tell you a little bit about our background, and just very humbly, I have to say I'm so grateful to be following a lot of these speakers. Despite myself, I've learned a whole lot and have gotten immersed in a lot of the more recent writing. Okay, so I'm going to give you some very brief background about me and my research team and my work. So not a few years ago, but many years ago, I'm afraid. I was right here on this campus. I was across campus, and I worked on a research team headed by this guy. Anyone know who that is? Many years ago. This is Carlo Di Clemente. Some folks were talking about him yesterday. Carlo is the originator of the trans-theoretical model, or the stages of change, along with Jim Prochaska. This is many, many years ago, and hopefully you can't find me in this picture too easily, but this was a milestone birthday for Carlo, and he came in one day, we were all dressed in black, and so this is his Italian waving his arms. So I got involved with him, and of course the stages of change model many, many years ago, in fact when it was relatively new, was at the University of Houston for several years, and then was recruited over to the University of Texas Medical School at Houston to work in family medicine and to become their director of research. So I spent many years there working with medical students and residents, and met some amazing colleagues, not only there, but while I was here at U of H, and you'll hear about some of them today. Kathy Crouch is here today. Kirk Munsterberg, who couldn't be here, was planning to, but he had some major dental work done, and he wasn't able to be here. But anyway, we took my research team. Joe Cavanari is also a faculty member in psychology, or was here for many, many years. So took our Angela Stotts, who's at the medical school, who's in this picture down below as well. So was at the medical school for many years, loved it there, and continued our work. It didn't, working with the trans-theoretical model, developing interventions, behavioral interventions, and then I got a phone call from David Springer and one from Barbara White, Diana Tenito, and UT Austin had kind of come calling. At the time, we had our children had gone to UT to go to school and sort of stayed there, and so I had said the only place I'll consider is Austin. I had worked with, Laura, you're back. Hey, Laura Benjamin's another person here in town that I've worked with. So I worked there and Laura is a physician and medical director for the juvenile justice system and the fellows program. So she works with residents and fellows in the medical school. She's a pediatrician. So we had a wonderful team here in Houston and a wonderful network. But I've been working with UT Austin on their research development grant funded by NIDA, and had worked as an advisor and kind of fell in love with some of those folks. And so eventually we moved to Austin, and it's been 6 years. So those of you who are students here, this is what at U of H, this is what your faculty looked like. Not too terribly long ago. There's Dr. Sampson, you can see her in the back, Dr. Bora, and of course Dr. Parrish is here. And they don't look all that different, but a little bit. So this was our sort of our health behavior research and training team, and Jody was part of that team for a while, Dr. Berger, but unfortunately she's not in this picture. But anyway, so all of our work, and so we moved from psychology at medical school to school social work, and I just had a lot of passion about working in social work. So I'm outing myself, I'm not a social worker, but I feel like I sort of have it coursing through my blood, and I found out that that's the case for a lot of folks. And so for many years we've worked with this trans-theoretical model framework and integrated it into our interventions. So many of you know, how many of you know about the trans-theoretical model? Yeah, just about everyone. So the stages of change are sort of the mainstay of that model, but there are some other pieces that actually are even of more interest to me, and I think Kathy's going to talk a little bit about some of those. But basically, as Dr. Bertram was talking about the theory of change or process of change, the trans-theoretical model offers some wonderful variables and I think some nice insights into the cognitive or experiential processes. What's going on as a client changes behavior? What's going on in their head? What are those experiential processes? And what are the behavioral processes? So beyond, what do they think, then what do they do? What are some markers of change? How can we measure those? So all of our research has had a component of the trans-theoretical model in it, or been grounded in it, really, in a lot of ways. And then as we began, I worked on a big project called Project Match, which was a multi-site alcoholism treatment matching study. For those of you who are old enough, you may be familiar with it or have read about it, and worked with some real giants in the field across disciplines. We were interested in knowing what do we do when our clients are not quite ready to change, and along came this thing called motivational interviewing. Bill Miller was one of our match investigators. Yes, that's how old I am, although I hate to admit it. So we started with some of the very first studies on motivational interviewing, and again, had incorporated that into our work. Those of you, and many of you are familiar with it now, and those of you who use motivational interviewing and teach it to your students know there's a heck of a lot more to it than just saying, I went to a workshop or I went to a training, as Dr. Bertram was just saying so beautifully. But motivational interviewing is, it kind of, at this point, it's like, you know, if you have a hammer, if they have a hammer, then everything becomes a nail. And so, unfortunately, motivational interviewing in some ways has been used that way. We try really hard in our studies to really have people develop the skills and the training and things that you talked with us about. There are at least 200 clinical trials, randomized trials of motivational interviewing. It's probably closer to even 1,000 now, but it's been very well researched. It can be used. You know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but it's relatively brief, and it's specifiable, and that's kind of the neat thing about it. We know when we hear motivational interviewing, we know when it's being used, we know when it's being used well, and we think we know some things about the mechanisms of change. The thing I like about motivational interviewing and the work that Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick have done is that they have been very open to changing it. There's a third edition of their book, and each time, recently, out just within the last few months, and each time there's a new edition, there are a lot of changes in motivational interviewing because they're learning a lot about what are the specific mechanisms that are happening in behavior change. One of the things we do in our studies is we take sessions and we listen to the tapes. We have the providers have digital recorders. They upload their tapes to our website, and we can code them using something called the Motivational Interviewing Treatment Integrity Coding System. So we can code the tapes and we can give them immediate feedback on what they're doing and how they're doing it. There's a big emphasis on what's called change talk. We know what change talk elicit sounds like, thanks to some psycholinguistic studies, or at least there's some theories about that. And the neat thing that we've been able to do with our research, and we've had a number of trials, is that we can see who's successful, right? So if you stick around long enough in the field and you're old enough and you have enough great data sets, both qualitative and quantitative, you can look at the successful changers. So we can look in our studies at clients, 3 years down the road who have really changed behavior and have been able to maintain that change. We can go back and we can look at them where they were at baseline on some variables. We can listen to their sessions. We can see where they were, most importantly, at the end of treatment. And is there a profile that predicts, and indeed there seems to be across a number of different studies of behaviors, there are these success profiles, and our colleague Kirk von Sternberg is doing a lot of important work with that. So the mechanisms seem to be specifiable, and this whole thing with change talk, there's preparatory change talk and commitment language, and helping the provider or in our case, social worker, use the right kind of language and the right kind of reflections at the right levels. You can use it across different program areas. I'm not going to go into a lot of that, but we know if it's being done properly. In a lot of programs, as I've seen through the years, motivational interviewing is being offered more frequently to our students. I just was talking to one of McLean's, and McLean's still here. How are you? Oh, she walks out of my talk. I won't say what I was going to say. That's so nice about her. And one of her students was talking to me just a few minutes ago, and a nice master's student named Carol, when I was outside. Hey, McLean, come back. I'm talking about you. And anyway, so I introduced myself and we talked for a minute. And she said, you worked with Dr. Simpson. Can I give you a hug? It was so sweet. And she said, I'm learning so much from her about motivational interviewing and the class's assessment, right? That you're reading some great stuff in. This is Bill Miller's picture I stole from him, but he does great photography.